The first thing I smelled was smoke. Not turkey, not pine candles, paper. My mother stood in the backyard with my college letters in one hand and a lighter in the other, while my father laughed from the porch. "Save the money for your brother," he said, like my 1,470 SAT was a cute mistake. The flames crawled over my applications, my payments, my bills, everything I had hidden from them. I didn't scream, I watched, because 6 months later, at Thanksgiving, that same phone rang, and when Mom answered, she whispered, "You mean?" My son. In our house. Camden's chair was always pulled out first. It sat at the head of the kitchen table, even though Dad claimed nobody had assigned seats. His plate got the bigger piece of chicken. His coffee got refilled before anyone asked. His problems became family emergencies. Mine became character building. The Reed house looked normal from the street. White siding, a trimmed little lawn, a front porch with 2 rocking chairs Mom never actually sat in. Every fall, she hung a wreath on the door and lit pine candles before guests came over. Like the smell alone could convince people we were warm inside. I learned early that peace in that house meant not needing anything. If Camden forgot homework, Mom drove it to school. If Camden quit soccer after Dad bought the gear, nobody mentioned the cost. If Camden wanted a car, Dad called it an investment. But when I asked about college visits, Mom's mouth tightened like I had brought up a bill we couldn't afford. "You're smart," she would say. "You'll figure something out." That was the kind of compliment that didn't open doors. It locked them quietly. By the time I was 18, I had become good at hiding hope. I wrote essays after midnight with my bedroom door cracked just enough to hear footsteps. I asked teachers for recommendation letters before school started so no one at home would see the envelopes. I checked admissions messages on an old laptop balanced on my knees. The screen dimmed low like I was doing something shameful. "My name is Diamond Reed." But back then, nobody in that house said my name like it belonged on anything important. Then the SAT score came. I printed it at school because I wanted to feel the paper in my hands. I wanted proof, something real, something Dad couldn't wave away with one of his jokes. That evening, the kitchen smelled like overcooked roast and Mom's lemon cleaner. Camden was leaning back in his chair, scrolling on his phone. Dad had his coffee mug beside him, cold and untouched. I placed the score report on the table. For one small second, I let myself imagine his face changing. Dad picked it up, glanced at the number, and laughed. Not a proud laugh, a dismissive one. Then he looked past me at Camden and said, "Save the money for your brother." Dad's laugh stayed in the kitchen longer than the sound itself. It sat between the plates. It followed me down the hall. It made the paper in my hand feel stupid and childish. Like I had brought home a drawing from kindergarten instead of a score most kids would have cried over. Camden never looked up from his phone. Mom did. Though, her eyes went to the score report, then to me, then to Dad's coffee mug. She didn't smile. She didn't defend me. She just folded a dish towel over the oven handle with both hands, slow and tight. "Your brother needs support right now," she said. For what I asked. Camden finally looked up. Seriously, Dad leaned back. "Don't start, Diamond." That was the rule in our house. If I asked a question, I was starting something. If Camden demanded money, attention, rides, chances, forgiveness, he was just figuring life out. So I stopped asking out loud. I kept applying. I wrote essays with my headphones on and no music playing, just so I could hear if someone came near my door. I hid letters under sweaters. I saved admissions messages in folders with boring names. When a scholarship office asked for payments and bills, I scanned what I could at the school library and sent everything before Mom could notice. For a few weeks, I thought I had built a door they couldn't see. Then, one Thursday, I came home and smelled smoke through the kitchen window. Not dinner smoke, paper smoke. The backyard grass was damp from morning rain. My shoes sank into it as I ran outside. Mom stood beside the old metal fire pit, wearing her good cardigan, the one she wore to parent-teacher meetings. In her hand was a stack of papers with university logos, scholarship records, payments, bills, and my name printed across the top. Mom, I said, but my voice came out thin. She dropped the first stack into the flame. The edges caught fast. I lunged forward, and Dad stepped off the porch. "Don't be dramatic," he said. Marlene didn't even raise her voice. "You are not leaving this family behind. I earned those. You hid those. They're mine." Her face didn't move. "Your brother matters right now." The fire cracked softly, like tiny bones. Camden stood behind the screen door, half hidden, watching just enough to know he was the reason and not enough to feel responsible. I could have screamed. I could have grabbed the papers and burned my hands. Instead, I saw one thing through the kitchen window, my old laptop upstairs, still holding every message she couldn't touch. I picked up one blackened corner from the grass. Ash smeared across my fingertips, and I stopped begging them to see me. The motel desk had a burn mark shaped like a crescent moon. I set my backpack on top of it and emptied everything I had left: 2 shirts, a toothbrush, my birth certificate, a few crumpled dollars, the SAT score report with one corner bent from my hand gripping it too hard. Then I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dark room, brighter than the flickering motel sign outside the window. I made 2 folders, one for what they had said, one for what I could prove. Admissions messages, scholarship records, payments, bills, screenshots of Mom's texts telling me college would tear the family apart. A message from Dad saying Camden needed a real chance. Like mine had been pretend. I saved everything twice. Then I called the admissions office from the payphone near the ice machine because my cell plan was almost dead. I kept my voice steady while I explained that some of my printed paperwork had been destroyed at home. The woman on the other end didn't gasp or pity me. She just gave me steps. Steps were easier than feelings. Request replacement records. Confirm scholarship status. Update mailing address. Secure personal documents. I wrote every instruction on the back of a motel receipt. That first week, I ate noodles from a paper cup and slept with my backpack under my arm. I took morning shifts at a diner off a wide road outside Columbus. Then folded clearance sweaters at a department store until closing. My feet ached so badly I would sit on the bathroom floor before showering because standing felt personal. Some nights, Dad's voice came back. "You'll be fine anywhere." It sounded different when anywhere was a room with a broken chain lock and carpet that smelled like old rain. But I didn't go back. A high school counselor connected me with an emergency student program. A manager at the diner let me pick up extra shifts. One afternoon, an older woman in a navy coat came in, ordered black coffee, and watched me rewrite a scholarship appeal between tables. "You always work like somebody's chasing you," she asked. I looked at her name on the card she handed me. Vivian Hale, my grandmother. She didn't hug me in the diner. She didn't make a scene. She just sat in the last booth and said quietly, "Your mother told me you were being ungrateful." I waited for the judgment. Instead, Grandma slid a plain envelope across the table. Inside was cash, not a fortune, just enough to breathe, and a note in her neat handwriting: "Do not spend this proving them wrong. Spend it keeping yourself safe." That was the first money I accepted without feeling owned by it. Over the next months, I rebuilt what Mom had tried to turn into ash. New records, new address, new passwords, new bank account, new silence. Not the silence they trained into me, the kind I chose. By Thanksgiving, I had a small room, a campus deferral, and a folder full of proof. When Mom invited me to dinner, I stared at her message until the screen dimmed. Then I packed the folder in my bag. The phone rang just as Dad lifted the carving knife. One sharp buzz from the kitchen counter. Then another. The sound cut through the clink of silverware, through the fake warmth of Thanksgiving candles, through Mom's careful little speech about how nice it was to have everyone under one roof again. No one had said the word sorry, not Dad, not Mom, not Camden, who sat in his same chair, wearing a new watch and acting like I was a guest who had wandered into the wrong house. I had been there for 40 minutes, and already Mom had called Camden sweetheart 6 times. She asked if he needed more mashed potatoes, if the gravy was warm enough, if the internship he wanted had called back. When she looked at me, her eyes slid past my face to my coat. Still staying downtown, she asked, "For now?" Dad snorted. "Sounds expensive." I set my fork down. Less expensive than having my future burned in a fire pit. The knife stopped against the turkey. Mom's mouth tightened. "This is Thanksgiving." "Exactly," I said. "I thought we were naming what we were thankful for." Camden muttered, "Here we go." That was when the phone buzzed again. Mom reached for it too fast, like she was grateful for anything that could pull the room away from me. She turned slightly toward the sink. "Hello." Her shoulders changed first. They went stiff under her cream sweater. Then her hand tightened around the phone. "Yes." "This is Marlene Reed," she said. Dad watched her. Camden watched his plate. I watched the color leave her face in slow inches, from her cheeks to her lips. "Grandchild," Mom repeated. The word landed harder than the turkey knife. She blinked, and for one strange second, she looked almost hopeful. Then she whispered, "You mean my son?" I felt my fingers close around the folder in my bag. The voice on the other end kept talking. Mom didn't answer for a moment. Her eyes moved to Camden, then to Dad, then finally to me. Not with love, with fear. "We'll be there," she said. The lawyer's office was downtown, above a bank with tinted windows and a lobby that smelled like floor polish. Ms. Carter met us in a conference room with a glass table and one plain envelope placed in the center. Dad walked in angry. That was how he handled fear. "Let's clear this up quickly," he said. "If Vivian left something for Camden, we can manage it as a family." Ms. Carter looked at him over her glasses. Mrs. Hale did not leave her estate to Camden. Camden's head snapped up. Mom gripped the edge of her purse. Ms. Carter opened a folder. "Before I read the distribution?" Mrs. Hale requested that this statement be acknowledged. She turned to me. "Diamond, your grandmother was aware that your college applications, scholarship records, payments, and bills were destroyed by your mother." Mom inhaled sharply. "That is not." I opened my folder and slid my copies across the table. SAT score, admissions messages, scholarship records, screenshots. Dad's message about saving resources for Camden. Mom's text saying college would tear the family apart. No shouting, no begging, just paper. Miss Carter looked at the documents, then back at my parents. "That aligns with what Mrs. Hale provided." Dad's face hardened. "This is family business?" "No," I said. It became evidence when she lit the match. The conference room went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Ms. Carter continued. "The entirety of Mrs. Hale's estate is left to Diamond Reed. Funds, investments, and personal property are to be transferred under the protections outlined here." Camden pushed back from the table. "Grandma wouldn't do that." "She did," Ms. Carter said. Dad leaned forward. "We contest it." Ms. Carter turned one page. "If any named family member contests the will or attempts to pressure Diamond into transferring assets, all remaining consideration is forfeited. All communication regarding the estate will go through this office." Mom finally looked at me. "Diamond," she said softly. "We're still family." I picked up Grandma's envelope. "You burned that word in the backyard." And this time, nobody laughed. Consequences arrived in plain envelopes. Not dramatic ones. No shouting on the porch, no police cars, no big scene for the neighbors to watch through their blinds. Just white envelopes with Ms. Carter's office address in the corner, sliding into mailboxes and landing on kitchen counters like facts nobody could burn. The first one told Dad that all estate questions had to go through the attorney. The second told Mom she was not to contact me about money, property, or family arrangements. The third went to Camden, and I heard about that one from him directly. He called me 6 days after Thanksgiving. I almost didn't answer. When I did, he didn't say hello. "You really did this?" he asked. I was standing in my tiny apartment kitchen, holding a mug of coffee with both hands. Rain tapped against the window over the sink. "I didn't write Grandma's will." Camden. "No. But you're letting it happen." That sentence almost made me laugh, but it came out more like air leaving my chest. "You let Mom burn my college applications." He went quiet. Not sorry quiet. cornered quiet. I didn't light the match. He said, "No," I said. "You just warmed your hands over it. After that." He stopped calling. Dad tried once, from another number. He left a message about responsibility, about family reputation, about how I was making my mother sick with stress. I sent it to Ms. Carter. Mom mailed me a Thanksgiving photo from years ago. All four of us at the table, Camden grinning, Dad holding the carving knife. Mom's hand resting on my shoulder like proof she had loved me in public when someone had a camera out. There was no note. I turned the photo over and wrote one sentence on the back. "A picture is not an apology." Then I put it in the same folder as everything else. I did use Grandma's money, but not the way they imagined. I paid the school balance I still owed. I accepted the place I had deferred. I rented a quiet room near campus with a lock that worked and a window that caught morning light. I bought a used desk, 2 lamps, and a filing box that could survive more than someone else's temper. Later, when I was stable, I started a small scholarship in Grandma Vivian's name. Nothing flashy, just help for girls who had good grades, no safety net, and families that called their dreams selfish. The first acceptance letter I helped fund came on thick cream paper. I held it for a long time before mailing it out. My apartment was quiet that morning. No laughter from the porch, no lighter clicking open, no one saying Camden needed more. Just coffee, rain, paper that finally meant possibility instead of loss. I placed Grandma's letter beside my keys and closed the drawer gently. I used to think ashes meant the end of something. Now I know they can mark the place where you stopped kneeling. If your family only loves you when you are useful, quiet, or willing to disappear, that is not love you have to earn. That is control dressed up in a family photo. I don't hate Camden. I don't even hate my parents, but I will never hand them another match and call it peace. Grandma's letter still sits in my drawer beside my keys. Some mornings, before work, I open it just to see her handwriting and remember one simple truth. They burned the papers. They did not burn the girl who wrote them. And if you have ever been asked to shrink so someone else could shine, share your story in the comments, subscribe so you don't miss the next one.